The August heat clung to the streets like an unwelcome guest, the kind that overstays and makes everyone uneasy. A heavy, dry air hung over Brookview Estates, the kind of neighborhood where manicured lawns and wrought iron gates were supposed to mean safety and order. But for Michael Johnson, those gates had never felt like a promise, more like a reminder. A reminder that certain people still looked at him and saw a question mark where his humanity should have been. That afternoon, he stood on his porch sipping iced tea, watching the slow crawl of the neighborhood patrol truck making its usual rounds. The driver was one of the HOA's hired security officers, a man named Rick Dawson. Rick wasn't law enforcement, never had been, but he wore a badge clipped to his belt like he'd earned it, and a sidearm that made him feel bigger than he was. Michael had seen the way Rick's eyes lingered on him a little too long, like he was waiting for a reason to remind him who really belonged in this neighborhood. Michael's daughter, Alana, was flying in from D.C. that day. He hadn't seen her in months. She worked long, grueling hours for the FBI, though she never went into much detail about her assignments. All Michael knew was that his little girl, the one who used to build tree forts and win science fairs, had grown into a woman who could take care of herself in ways most people couldn't imagine. That thought always gave him comfort. It was just after 6 p.m. when he saw her car turn into the driveway, a black SUV, windows down, her natural curls catching the sunset. Michael smiled wide, stepping forward to greet her. But before she could even park, the slow-rolling hum of Rick Dawson's patrol truck reappeared, this time stopping right in front of the Johnson home. Rick climbed out, one hand on his holster, the other gesturing for her to stop. His voice cut through the summer air, sharp and commanding. "Ma'am, this is a private community. I'm gonna need you to step out of the vehicle." Alana glanced at her father, her brow furrowed. "I live here," she said calmly, motioning toward Michael. "That's my dad. I'm visiting him." Rick's lips curled into something between a smirk and a sneer. "License. Now." Michael stepped forward, his voice steady but edged with warning. "Rick, that's my daughter. She's fine. Let her park." But Rick didn't take his eyes off Alana. He took a step closer to her SUV, resting his palm on the grip of his gun. "Sir, I'll handle this." Time slowed. Michael's heart pounded in his ears. He'd seen enough in his lifetime to know exactly what was happening and exactly how fast it could spiral. "Rick," he said again, this time firmer. "Back up. She hasn't done anything." That's when Rick's hand shifted, unholstering his weapon and pointing it low but deliberate toward Alana's driver's side door. The world seemed to tilt. Michael's voice caught in his throat, the sight of cold steel aimed at his child sending a rush of heat and ice through his veins. Alana didn't flinch. Not even a fraction. She slowly turned her head toward him, and for the first time Rick seemed to notice the faint bulge under her blazer, the kind that only came from a holstered service weapon. Her voice was calm, level, but carried the weight of someone who had stared down danger before. "Sir," she said evenly, "you're pointing a loaded firearm at a federal agent. I need you to lower your weapon, now." Rick's eyes flickered, confusion wrestling with arrogance. "What?" She stepped out of the SUV with deliberate control, her hands visible. The badge clipped to her belt caught the dying light of the sun, FBI, gold and blue, unmistakable. "I am Special Agent Alana Johnson, FBI Tactical Operations. You are brandishing a firearm at me without cause, and you are now interfering with federal personnel in the execution of their duties. Put it down." Michael's breath caught. Even in the tension of the moment, a wave of pride surged through him. His daughter stood tall, unshaken, her voice slicing through the air like a blade. She didn't raise her weapon. She didn't escalate. She didn't need to. Rick hesitated, his grip loosening, the false authority draining from his posture. He holstered his weapon, muttering something about just doing my job, but the tremor in his voice betrayed him. "Your job," Alana said, stepping closer until they were eye to eye, "is to observe and report. Not to intimidate residents. Not to threaten women in their own neighborhood. And definitely not to pull a gun on a federal agent's daughter." She let the silence hang between them, heavy and deliberate. "This could end in your arrest. Or worse." Rick's face flushed deep red, but he turned back toward his truck without another word. The engine sputtered to life, and he drove off without his usual slow prowl, leaving the street eerily quiet. Michael exhaled slowly, his hands trembling just enough to betray the fear he had kept buried in those tense minutes. "You okay?" he asked her. Alana gave him a small smile, though her eyes still held the sharpness of the moment. "Yeah, Dad. I'm fine. I've been through worse." But as she stepped into his embrace, he felt the subtle strength in her frame, the resilience built from years of navigating a world that too often mistook her for less than she was. Inside, as they sat at the kitchen table, Michael poured her a glass of sweet tea. "You know," he said quietly, "when I saw that gun come up, I thought about all the names, all the faces, all the families who never got to have the ending we just did." Alana nodded, her voice low. "That's why we can't let moments like this slide." Not one. Neither of them noticed the neighbor across the street peeking through her blinds, phone in hand, already dialing another board member. Word would travel fast in Brookview Estates. What Rick didn't realize was that the next conversation about what happened wouldn't be a whispered one over fences, it would be an official one, in a room where his badge and his story wouldn't protect him. The next morning, the neighborhood felt different. Michael could sense it before he even opened his front door. The air wasn't thick with heat this time, it was thick with whispers. A few residents glanced his way as they walked their dogs, their polite smiles replaced with something tighter, something unsure. By noon, his phone rang. It was Carol Whitman, one of the HOA board members. Her tone was sugar-coated, but Michael could hear the strain beneath it. "Michael, I've been told there was an incident yesterday involving your daughter and our security contractor. We just want to make sure everything is resolved." Resolved. The word sat bitter on his tongue. "No, Carol," he replied evenly. "It's not resolved. Your security officer pointed a loaded gun at my daughter without provocation. She's a federal agent. Do you understand what that means?" There was a pause on the line, a faint shuffle of papers. "Well," Rick said, he thought she was trespassing. "You know how things can be misinterpreted." "This wasn't a misinterpretation," Michael cut in, his voice sharper now. "It was racial profiling. And it was a dangerous, unlawful use of force. If you think I'm going to let it slide, you're wrong." Carol's voice faltered. What do you plan to do?" Michael didn't answer her directly. "You'll find out at tonight's board meeting." And he hung up. That evening, the HOA meeting room was fuller than usual. Word had spread faster than anyone expected, and the air was charged. Alana stood at the back, in plain clothes this time, her expression unreadable. Rick was there too, leaning against the wall with his arms crossed, eyes darting between faces. When the meeting opened for community concerns, Michael stood. His voice carried not just for himself, but for every black family who had ever been made to feel unwelcome in a place they paid to live. 2 days ago, he began, my daughter, who has every right to be here, was confronted by your hired security officer. Without asking for her name, without giving her a chance to explain, he rested his hand on his gun. Then he drew it. On my child. In my driveway. For nothing more than driving a car he didn't recognize and having skin he decided didn't belong. Murmurs rippled through the room. Rick shifted in his chair but didn't speak. Michael continued, his voice low but firm. Now, you may think this is just a misunderstanding. That I should let it go. But I'm telling you right now, I will not. Because next time, it could be someone else's daughter. Someone without the training to de-escalate. And instead of standing here tonight, we'd be planning a funeral. Alana stepped forward then, her badge clipped to her belt. The murmurs fell silent. She spoke with the precision of someone trained to make every word count. My name is Special Agent Alana Johnson. I am a tactical commander with the Federal Bureau of Investigation. Your contractor, Mr. Dawson, committed a felony when he brandished a firearm at me without cause. That's assault with a deadly weapon. In addition, he attempted to detain me without legal authority. I could have arrested him on the spot. Rick's jaw tightened, but Alana's eyes didn't leave his. The only reason I didn't, she continued, is because I knew exactly how quickly a situation like that can turn fatal when the wrong person panics. I chose to keep my weapon holstered because I knew my father was watching. And because I knew that if I moved wrong, even as a federal agent, I might not walk away. The room was still now, the weight of her words sinking into the walls. This community, she said, scanning the faces, is not safer because of people like him. It is less safe. And if your HOA continues to employ individuals who act on prejudice rather than policy, you are opening yourselves up to far more than bad publicity. You're opening yourselves up to lawsuits, criminal charges, and a stain on your neighborhood's reputation that no fence or gate can hide. The president of the board, an older man named Grant, cleared his throat. Agent Johnson, we will conduct a review. Of course. But perhaps we can find a way to resolve this quietly, without bringing in. Without bringing in what? Alana's voice was calm but razor-sharp. Accountability? Transparency? Justice? I'm not here to negotiate my safety or anyone else's. This will be reported. And you will replace him with someone who understands the law and basic human decency. Silence. Even Grant couldn't meet her gaze. By the end of the meeting, Rick had been placed on temporary leave, though everyone in the room knew it was only because the HOA was scrambling to protect itself. Alana had already filed an incident report with the local police department and her own agency, ensuring that the matter wouldn't be buried. When they stepped out into the night air, Michael felt a strange mix of relief and heaviness. You handled that, he said quietly, better than I could have. Alana smiled faintly. Dad, I've been handling people like Rick my whole career. The badge doesn't protect me from bias, but it does give me the tools to fight back. And that's what we have to do. Every time. They walked back to the house in comfortable silence, the cicadas buzzing in the dark. Inside, Michael poured them both another glass of sweet tea. It struck him then how close they had come to a very different ending. One where a trigger pull, a half-second of panic, could have erased everything they were. But tonight, they were here. And Rick Dawson, for all his bluster, had been forced to look into the eyes of the woman he tried to intimidate and realize she was someone he could never overpower. Somewhere in Brookview Estates, behind closed doors, the conversations would continue. Some would defend him. Others would say nothing at all. But for Michael and Alana, this wasn't just about one night. It was about every night to come in this neighborhood and beyond. Because as long as there were gates meant to keep people out, there would be moments like this. And as long as there were moments like this, there would be voices like theirs, refusing to be silenced.